Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's special episode of Let's Get Vaccinated on HoodMed Chat's Desperate Times. And we pulled this together to try to give some urgent info to people impacted by the infant formula shortage. Hood Medicine Initiative is a nonprofit collective of scientists, physicians, hackers, and assorted geeks focused on health equity and reducing the spread of mis and disinformation in Black and Brown digital spaces. And today I have with me Paula Littlejohn, also known as Sister in Science, who's been a frequent contributor to Hood Medicine for our maternal and infant health social media content for quite some time now. Paula is currently a PhD candidate in microbiology and immunology at Michael Smith Laboratories at the University of British Columbia. Her mentor is Dr. Brett Finlay, and she researches the impact of early life multiple micronutrient deficiency on the gut microbiome, and is curious about the role of the double burden of malnutrition. Her academic background includes a BS in biobehavioral health from Penn State. She's got a master's in social and behavioral science and health education from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and a graduate certificate in maternal and child health from the same university. She also has vast prior research experience under her belt, which spans from nutrigenomics to 10 years of work on various clinical trials within the pharmaceutical industry. Thank you so much, Paula, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nisi, for inviting me. And this is a really exciting conversation. And definitely, I love the work that Hood Medicine does. And, every time I see one of your feeds or anything, I'm always like. I can share.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your passion for scientific outreach? Let's start there, and why you focus on maternal health.
Exactly, yeah, because once I have a certificate in maternal and child health when I was at Johns Hopkins. And so for me, we have similar, there's so much science-based communication out there, especially when it comes to our communities, Black and Brown communities. We just get wrong information, and and then we just kind of take it and we just believe it is true, and no one is there to tell us that it's wrong. And so it's really nice when you can see scientists that look like us to be able to say, no, this information is incorrect, and we're going to give you the truth because we care about you, because we care about ourselves. When I see you, I see me. And so that's kind of the impetus of why I decided to engage in scientific communication. And when I love talking about health, I'm always doing it, in my family, in my household, with my friends. And so it was sort of natural to just kind of take it to the media space.
So today you are here to talk to us about the infant formula shortage in the US. For a little background for you guys, basically there was a recall, and since we love monopolies here and robber barons and everything else, the problem is there actually aren't enough manufacturers to meet the demand, because these companies operate with like relatively small number of factories for production efficiency, and they keep their costs low, which at a time like this creates a huge backlog for production. There's also a few companies that control the entire industry. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's dominated by a handful of firms. In the US, there's only 4 that control about 90% of the market. And that includes Abbott, which is the company whose formula was recalled, causing the issue in the first place. So firstly, I guess what's needed is obviously more diversity in terms of the overall supply chain, perhaps even opening the door for imports of formula supplies as well, which we don't currently accept here. And then about half of all of the formula that's sold here goes through the USDA through the WIC program, which is a special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. We'll get into how to tap into those resources to find help in your location later, and also in the pre-recorded conversation we're going to share with you in a bit. As a quick update, the FDA has allowed Abbott to start manufacturing again. But of course, that run up to production and subsequent inspection of that first run may still cause a delay before we see cans on the shelf again. So what we wanted to do today was just to provide some information, whatever we can, to try to help people get by in these next couple of weeks while they are waiting for the US to resolve this crisis. So Paula, let's hear from you on like, why has this had such a devastating impact on our communities?
Well, because we're often in the areas of like food deserts, and food insecurity affects us the most, and for various reasons. But we'll tag it onto systematic racism, which we know the systems that are built to keep us in these neighborhoods, keep us in low-paying jobs, keep us in environments where we don't. Our grocery stores and our supply chains are at the end. Versus like what feeds into higher income and mostly predominantly white neighborhoods. And so we suffer a lot from that. And then the other part is that we can't ignore is the hoarding mentality of Americans when it comes to scarcity. And that's really what triggered most of this, is that there were formulas on the shelf, but everyone is afraid of, let me take care of me and not think about my neighbor. Let me not think about anyone else. And so they just took everything off the shelf. And that kind of created more panic. And then once it got picked up in the media, media in the States does not do a good job of communicating information properly. And so it just fed into more of a frenzy. And so that's what really led to this chaos of what's going on. And like you said, because we the power to be didn't really see down the line that having a monopoly on formula was not a good practice. you know, that, right, like that's a surprise. Monopoly doesn't work, when you're having some kind of food chain situation and not, allowing other countries who make just as good or probably better quality products to even sell their products in the United States. And then they label them. There's a lot of tricks, these are unsafe or this or that, and so people are become, a lot of things coming in from different countries, and you're like, hello, they have children and they live, they survive. And sometimes we just have to open up our minds and say that. And I think this is why we're here, to say no, let's dismantle all of this nonsense and get us out, pull ourselves out of the box that they try to put us in, to kind of just think this one way, have this narrow tunnel vision on North American and westernized policies and countries and acceptance for everything, that this is the gold standard for life. And it's so far from the truth.
Yeah. And I think in terms of when we think about how we provision feeding and feeding care for our infants here, there's a disparity even in the ability that some mothers from Black and Brown communities have to breastfeed, because even though people like Bette Midler, who has no idea what she's talking about, obviously, want to jump in and say, just breastfeed, it's natural, whatever. It's like, first of all, you need time, equipment, and employer accommodation to breastfeed in this country. 3 things that a lot of disadvantaged low-income mothers do not have, right?
Exactly. And breast milk, it isn't just like put the baby on. There is, like, you have to make sure they latch properly. If they mislatch, like, you have hell to pay. It's very painful. Like, when I had my first child, a nurse came in and did education on like how to actually breastfeed my baby, and it is important, and how the milk comes out and how they latch on, and that they're actually getting what they need and they're not fussy. Because then sometimes what happens is that the babies become, and we misinterpret that, oh, they're not getting enough, and so let's not feed them. And an interesting story, you talk about Black and Brown community with breastfeeding. My husband, when his mother was pregnant, when she had him, she said in her neighborhood, which ironically was Michigan, no one was breastfeeding. Wonder why, right? Because the formula company is there. And so she was the first. She decided to breastfeed, and she said nurses and everyone was just coming from everywhere because they wanted to see this phenomenon of a Black woman breastfeeding her baby. So it's also not encouraged in our communities at all. In addition to the barriers that we have, you need to be able to store it. You need to be able to have space that you can do that. You don't have adequate maternity leave to even do that. So there's so many barriers that we have, that just getting up all of a sudden saying, oh, just breastfeed, so, come on, you don't even have spaces to do that.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of stigma in our community, I think, and there's not enough help and resources. And we know from the statistics how um, maternal and infant care, prenatal and postpartum, is lacking for our communities. So people don't have as much access to lactation specialists and nursing support,
Absolutely.
and certainly not in a lot of, you know, employer spaces, those accommodations to allow employees to take full advantage of the pumping that you need to do in between feedings to keep up your milk supply, right?
Exactly. And there's a lot of lobbying from these formulas, these companies as well. Even the World Health Organization has like a lot of kickback, a lot of publications about it. That how many? I think it's like they put 90 published 90 articles every minute or something like that. It's a ridiculous amount of number that they continue to put out there because they spend billions of dollars. And I remember even when I was growing up in the States that it was always like, oh, are you Similac or Infamil baby? That was kind of it. Like if there was no other alternative life and no other options. It was never the case. I never heard about breastfeeding. And it was like, oh, you're going to pick between these two? And I'm like, neither. I don't like either one of those. And so that is one of the problems, too, is that we're marketed into our communities. You think about what's in our communities when you get there, billboards, often. And so you're conditioning people to even think about that and not even training them to think that you have another option. And like you said, you need lactation consultants. So they're supposed to be across the United States. We don't have that in our hospital. Like, are we even trained? Or will we go in for, care? Are we even structuring some of those systems around our particular and unique circumstances? Okay, so yes, we may not have a lot of communities have the lush jobs, but it doesn't mean that you can't create programs and spaces around what is there and work with communities to say, okay, can we take advantage of the work schedule that is here? How can we build things close by certain jobs so that the mom can just run across the street and do something, and we have a fridge so you can pump, write your name on it, and you have your little stock there. You can just take it on your way home. So there are a lot of ways that you can do this in the United States, and there's money to do this. It's just that the care and the interest is not there, and that's the honest truth.
And we know that because just this week we had Louisiana Senator, is he governor, trash person, whatever his name is, Bill Cassidy, who decided to let everyone know that, their maternal death rates would, be great if we just count out Black women, for whatever reason. Our maternal death rate.
What does that mean?
Ruining the numbers. It's just like, let me tell you what the parameter.
I don't, because I guess I'm just not an idiot. So I don't know how to even wrap my brain around why that would make sense. So there is maternal death. Like,
he says, and I quote, if you correct our population for race, we're not as much of an outlier as it otherwise appear. And here's the thing. The maternal infant death rates in this country are 4 times higher for Black and brown women than white women. But here's what he didn't say. The babies are no less viable.
Exactly.
I'm gonna let that hang in the air for a minute. The babies are no less viable. There's only one difference there. And that's the doctors and the care that they get and the access to the care that they get. And he knows that. He's a physician. He knows that. They all know it. For anyone from me to Serena Williams can tell you, any Black mother in this country can tell you what it's like to give birth in this system. It's trash. It's a nightmare. I had nightmare birth story. Almost all of us have nightmare birth stories because we're ignored, disbelieved. We get last minute care. Even for me, who is a scientist, I talk the talk, I walk the walk. I can let you know exactly. I understand all the Latin, everything. I get it. Still, you're ignored until it's too late, until you start bleeding out, and it's just that's the part that they're not saying. He's saying the quiet part out loud, but not the culpability part.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just getting old, and, I'm just tired of this rhetoric, and I'm tired of people not caring. And this is why, like hood medicine is important, because we have to start caring. We have to let people know that we care and that we matter and that we are humans And we're not, second class citizen or second class humans, or we're not cattle and all these things that they've tried to label us with over the years. And we're not more, we don't take pain better, and we can just drop a baby out of our, tutu and keep on going as if we're a giraffe or something like that. No, we are not that. And for all the moms listening, you are human, and you deserve to be treated with respect, dignity, and care from the medical system, because they took an oath. They took an oath. And they're supposed to honor, do no harm. And they're supposed to honor that oath and care for you. And if you can, because it seems like, if you have someone else in the room with you, or you have, your care level will go up, have your advocate. For every chance that you get, have an advocate with you in your birthing spaces, and look for, this time we may have to go back to my in Canada, I had a midwife, and she was Black. And I think that's what my experience was very different. And when I was in the States, two of my kids, one, I was born in a rural area, and so it was not too much going on there. And the doctor didn't even come in the room, which I was glad, because he was a jerk. But exactly, but when I was in Texas, my doctor, she was Hispanic, Latina, I think the correct terms. And so she knew of all these things. And so she was very, caring. Like, they would take pictures of you every time you came in to make sure, like, are you gaining too much weight? She would ask you what you're eating, like everything. So a lot of care there, because she understood, the communities and the difficulties that we face. So I didn't have that there, have that traumatic experience. But I know there are a lot of moms who do, and it's shameful, the amount of women that died from something that is not a disease. We act like giving birth is a sickness and a disease, and it's not. And we're just treated as if it is that way. And
yeah, we are definitely advocating for a doula renaissance over here. Midwifery is really important in terms of having that advocacy, because you need to have someone in the labor and delivery room who cares about the life of your baby and yours as well.
Exactly.
But as we wait for our leadership to scramble to address this crisis, we did want to share this discussion we had earlier in the week, so that now you can hear directly from some of our pediatric and lactation experts. We talked a little bit about breastfeeding and how you can successfully try to do that to, mitigate and supplement as we get through this crisis. Substitutions for newborns and older babies who might already be on a developmental path towards eating some solids and other liquids. And then just some basic do's and don'ts for formulas, supplementation, and practical resources. So we're gonna share this video with you guys now. We're gonna post a special edition of HoodMed Chats to address the infant formula shortage and try to get some advice from our experts. We have a number of people on today. Dr. Eric Yancey, Dr. Kelsey McCoy, and Lydia Boyd will be joining us shortly, a lactation consultant in LA. Dr. Yancey, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and we can get started.
Sure. Hi. Thank you very much, Dr. Hudson. I'm Eric Yancey, pediatrician. I've been a pediatrician for about the last 42 years. Private practice here in the city of Indianapolis, serving a large number of children of all persuasions. But my office is located in an inner city area, and I'm just trying to make it through every day at a time.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Dr. McCoy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kelsey McCoy. I'm a pediatrician in Los Angeles, California. I work at a county hospital serving underserved populations in Sylmar. And I'm happy to be involved. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us on such short notice. So I guess I wanted to start with you, Dr. Yancey. Essentially, we know that, we're currently in the midst of this sort of infant formula shortage due to the impacts of ongoing pandemic and the recent Abbott recall of certain like powdered infant formula. And so the supply chain disruptions have affected, all consumers across the US. And we know that parents and caregivers might be looking to figure out what they can do in the meantime. And so I wanted to start with you and to just have you maybe give our listeners an idea of, let's start with firstly, like, what can we do? Let's start there.
Well, I think that one of the tenets of what we really have to look at is in this situation, try not to do any harm. I think that is going to be one of the first things. The old primum notus nocerne, whatever, the Latin for first do no harm. So we do have this shortage, so we have to look at what can we do in the short term to try to get through this. We're looking at maybe a few weeks, hopefully not much longer than that. But we don't want to do things that are going to be detrimental to young developing brains and hearts and kidneys that could have long-term consequences. So I think that one of the first things, and I'm sure that our lactation consultant will get to that, we certainly want to encourage breastfeeding. She'll go through all of the situations related to that, but there's nothing healthier than that. So if you're considering breastfeeding for your newborn, definitely do continue considering it, because that's the healthiest way to go. But now with the shortage, we're going to find a lot of things, a lot of recommendations. But some years ago, back in the 60s, there were a lot of formulas being fed to babies. And so many times people will say, well, they drank this stuff back in the 60s and everybody seems to be okay. Well, the problem is that everybody wasn't really okay. We found out there were various deficiencies in those. There was chloride deficiencies. There were certain amounts of protein imbalances with some of the carbohydrates used. And so we've had much better ways of coming up with formulas now than at that point that are much healthier for infants. So the first thing, if you're talking about a baby in the first 3 to 4 months of life, we got to try everything we can to get some of the proprietary formula that's approved and been actually developed in a way that's healthy to babies. And that is going to, if the big superstores don't have it on the shelves, then you got to look in surrounding areas, smaller communities, smaller drugstores, see who may have some stores at their houses that's not expired, of course, that we can actually use that way. So we really have to kind of focus on that, on the ones between the 0 and 3 or 4 months of age. And if you're able to call food pantries, things like that, that also would help. We want to stay away from a lot of the build it at home type remedies, because some of them have chemicals in them that the baby shouldn't have, or they're not balanced. Proteins are off, fats are off, and those can cause, they don't always cause, but they can cause serious health issues for the children. After 6 months, if you're absolutely unable to find anything, then you got to talk to your pediatrician to see what kind of substitute they would want to use there. Sometimes we've had to go with certain amounts of cow's milk with iron added, because it's very iron deficient, and we know that's one of the major causes there, one of the major problems with that. But that would be a very short-term situation. We don't recommend that over long-term at all. But if you can't find anything, talk to the pediatrician. You may have to go with some more of that. But I would say, and do everything possible in that first 3 to 4 months to try to come up with an approved commercial formula that has been constructed in a way that's healthier to babies.
Thank you. And Lydia, as Dr. Yancey mentioned, obviously for some parents, they're recommending, the Health and Hospital Service, for example, is recommending to breastfeed exclusively if at all possible. But can you talk a little bit about women who may not have been breastfeeding or stopped breastfeeding? Like, how easy is that to restart your production?
It's all on how long it's been since someone was lactating. It was just a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. We kind of recharge that milk supply, but it may take a minute to be able to see any kind of production. Also, in some cases, not see any milk production. It's been too long. Depends on the person's health, what they have going on, and then if someone is just trying to put the baby back to the breast, and there was already an issue, then we need to be open to using something else. We may need to use hand expression in combination with a mechanical pump, whether it's a manual pump or electric pump. In an ideal situation, we would have a baby that doesn't have any kind of herb, and then we can also use electric pump to some hand expression. But that's not for everyone. That's not available or accessible to everyone. We definitely conversation with a lactation professional to check in the history.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. McCoy, one of the other recommendations that we've seen is that, you might have friends, let's say, that have frozen breast milk supplies that maybe they're not using anymore. Can you talk a little bit about the safety aspect there? Obviously, shared nursing is something that's been happening since the dawn of time, with nursemaids, et cetera. And there's obviously banks that have breast milk available currently, but without being able to go to a bank and know that milk has been tested and the sterility, et cetera. Can you talk to us a little bit about how safe it is to borrow breast milk from other lactating moms?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a couple things to be aware of with breast milk that you're getting from someone else, and that is, one, did they collect it in a sterile and safe way and store it properly? I'd like to echo what Dr. Yancey was sort of mentioning earlier. Safety is one of the biggest things that we want to care about. And just like sort of formulas and things that are maybe not produced, at factories or in a regulated way, there's risks for infection and also potentially contamination of breast milk as much as there is for formula. Additionally, there's some transmissible infections such as HIV or hepatitis B that can be transmitted in breast milk. So if you are going to use, breast milk from some other person, you really want to be conscientious and think about and ask really important questions about how did they collect it? How has it been stored? Has it been frozen? Has it been refrigerated? And then you also need to know a little bit about that person's health too, because there are certain infections that maybe that person has that you don't want to accidentally expose your infant to. They may be taking medications also, which some medications can go into breast milk. So there are a number of reasons why, some parents, as we were kind of mentioning earlier, aren't actually able to breastfeed in general. And those are medical reasons. So if you're getting breast milk from a different source, it's really important to feel comfortable asking those questions of someone and actually getting accurate answers to feel comfortable to provide your infant with someone else's milk. So there's definitely, benefits that we've gone over with breastfeeding and breast milk in general. But there's risks if you don't know exactly what the supply is and sort of the medical history of the person who's providing that milk to you. So those would be important considerations that I would think carefully about before offering it to your baby.
Sure. And Lydia, are there banks available now that are kind of answering the call and trying to help people get breast milk from sort of more structured source? I think your mic might be muted, actually, or...
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Oh, okay.
Forge so they huge campaign on to support milk. So milk bank across the country. Here in Los Angeles, we our one is in San Jose. So Mother's Milk Bank of San Jose. Is Humana, who is more on a national level, that provides resources to those who want to use banked milk. There are some notable Facebook, social media for personal sharing, and they do cover all the McCoy just talked about, and they're structured personal exchange or share. So these within the lactation community are the ones that that we will reference when supporting a family that gets donated milk.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to grab those links from you later to post in the chat. Dr. Yancey, there are a few other recommendations regarding formula that I wanted you to just explain for people, because I'm sure people are thinking, I might only have 1 or 2 cans left. Maybe I could just like use a little bit less, dilute it, try to stretch it. Why is that something that they're recommending against?
Okay, I want to hit about three different real quickly areas on that. The first is dilution. And the formulas are set up to be exactly with a certain amount of concentration that's going to be acceptable to the baby's kidneys and being able to assimilate those nutrients that are there. So when you dilute it, you actually increase the water content, and that can actually lead to a certain amount of brain swelling. It can lead to electrolyte imbalances in the baby, and that can be disastrous. So we don't recommend that as one of those reasons. They're going to be per ounce less calories going in. So diluting is not a good option by any means. Another option that comes up is like going to some of the plant-based milks and just say, okay, well, let's go with the almond milk or rice milk, oat milk, things like that. And although we do have a soy protein formula that's actually balanced, okay, we do not recommend going to like the other plant-based milks. The protein contents are usually too low, and over a period of time, that too can cause problems with growth failure, as well as you still can run it. The kidneys are very sensitive organs in young babies, so we have to be very careful about that. The evaporated milk formulas also sometimes will have, once they're reconstituted, sometimes we'll have electrolyte imbalances as well. I probably have said the term balance 100 times because balance is what we really have to look for. And this is, so we found that things that worked, worked 40 or 50 years ago, we're finding out a lot of things, they weren't best 40 or 50 years ago. We just didn't know they weren't best 40 or 50 years ago. So I think when folks then say, well, it worked back in the 50s and 60s, the answer is, well, it probably didn't work nearly as well as we once thought it was. So we can't just go back. I mean, for instance, we sleep babies on their stomachs all the time. And everybody says, well, they lived. Okay, well, now we know there's a better way. Okay, and so we have to look at progress through the lens of what do we now know that we didn't know then. And so I think that's why we have to be very cautious with some of the things that were done that great grandma did. They're not the best things. So I look at dilution, no. Evaporated milk, no. And condensed milk with added sugars in it, no. We got to keep seeing if we can find the actual balanced formulas and talk with those pediatricians about what would be the next best step. It's not the best idea to just get the formulas off the internet.
And Dr. McCoy, what about substituting formulas? I know this is hopefully for most people just going to be a temporary solution, but what if you have to switch a baby to a different formula to because you have no other choice in this time right now? What are the risks there?
That's a really good question. I've actually had a number of my families that have asked me this question recently because they've not been able to find the particular brand that their infant is taking. So one thing that's very reassuring, is that all infant formulas that are on the market, that are available, are really tightly regulated, like we've been talking about. So they are nutritionally equivalent to each other. So it is actually okay if you are taking Enfamil for your baby, for example, but you need to switch to, say, a Similac or something like that, or vice versa for a short period of time. You can feel comfortable in the fact that your baby will still be getting the correct amounts of proteins and carbohydrates and minerals and things that the prior formula you were on was giving. The one thing I will say is anytime you switch in between formulas, oftentimes there are slight differences, in how the proteins and everything like that are sort of digested by the system. So you may notice in the first week or so, if you switch to a different formula, your baby's poops or digestion may be a little bit different than it was previously. That's okay as long as your baby is still gaining weight, taking good amounts of bottles, and making good amounts of diapers. So parents can feel okay about switching for a period of time, or even completely switching to a different brand of formula. It should still be safe.
Great. And Dr. Yancey, I know you have to leave to go take care of some babies. We really appreciate you taking a quick second to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Would you have any parting comments?
Just real quickly, I'll say philosophically, number one, don't hoard. Okay, if you find a good store of it, other people have babies too. And the second thing is, absolutely, let's not let a temporary solution lead to long-term problems. So those would be my only two philosophical questions. We're going to get through this. They're opening up things now to see if we can get some plants moving. It'll be temporary, but let's not damage the babies in the process.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Have a good one.
See you soon. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, ladies, if you don't mind, we'll continue on with you, since Dr. Yancey had to go take care of some babies. Lydia, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, in terms of babies who were on formula and now might need to go back to breastfeeding. Besides latching, what are some issues are there any other issues that people need to be aware of that might come up with trying to transition back to the breast?
Just normal things, not, people, but they're actually to digest. So in some cases, families may mistake breastfed elimination as diarrhea, but they may breastfed poop is, yellow mustard color with seeds. Some days where poopy diapers, but you see a lot of wet diapers, and then you may see this huge blood that sometimes can be mixed as diarrhea or loose stool, but it's actually very normal. You have a baby that may want to, especially if they're at the breast. Whereas if you were giving or you were supplementing with formula on breast milk, you may see a baby who those you're like, well, I don't. But formula is extremely easy to digest. It gets in and it gets out. And one of the things I like to families is think your breast milk as that really good salad. Not, chintzy salad you get at Denny's with the 1,000 items. You may get a couple tomatoes and maybe one or two croutons. But really good salad. It has some good romaine. You probably have some spinach, some arugula. You have some red onions, some mushrooms, some tomatoes.
You're making me hungry, but yeah.
Good lean meat, and then you have a nice pepper. And a piece of good bread. So that will fill you up, but it's not going to stay with you a long time, right? Because it's high nutrients, so it gets in, it doesn't eat, it leaves because it does down. So you're going to be hungry again, and that's normal. Nothing wrong with that. And so that's the food that we want. But just see that there's a little bit of difference on how the baby responds.
And so, but you mentioned earlier about how it might be hard to kickstart your production again. So do you recommend for people, in light of the fact that the baby might need to be fed more often, or might, it goes through them rather quickly, what do you recommend? Like, should people pump a lot in between if they can? Should they try to feed more often to kickstart that production?
Yeah, for those who have breastfed and we're relactating or moving away from giving as much formula, and so we're having to use our breast more. First thing, move milk more often. The decision is 2 weeks. Decision and start measuring our milk supply. And in that 2 weeks, you may see progression of your increase. This is when you start to, baby will want to feed more. Need to do is then in hand expression in addition to giving those bottles. So you are every bottle that so was maybe just latching at night time and giving bottles for the rest of the day. She's not only feeding at the breast at night, produce feedings during the day, some bottles to make sure that her protein increase. For the few bottles that she's giving now, she needs to pump, and then we can also use that milk that she's pumping. Either we can put it in the freezer in the event that it's formula, or we can, as she has, and give that breast milk now, and still do some combination feeding. One of the messages that we really need to tell families, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? Increase so that maybe that's the way that you stretch your milk. Like Dr. Yancey said, we don't want to dilute the formula. So instead of having that, maybe you want to gradually increase the breast milk you're using and then slowly decrease the amount of formula that you're using. And that's actually a very viable option for families.
Thank you. Dr. McCoy, I know we've talked a lot about younger infants, newborn to 3 months. What about 3 to 6, 6 to 12? What about those infants who may have already started to become introduced to solids, maybe some juice, some cereal in the bottle? What are the ways they can try to supplement with the formula shortage?
Yeah, great question. So it depends a little bit on the age of your infant. I still, would emphasize to families that breast milk or formula is the really supportive for nutrition still in those older infants, and we don't recommend going to cow's milk before the age of 1 year old. But in those babies that are older, say 6 months and upwards, you're really in that window where you are starting to increase solid foods in a gradual manner. And if you are especially in that 9 months and up age group, those babies are really getting to hopefully eating more table foods, really increase their solid food nutrition as a way to kind of offset your need for formula. And that's actually developmentally really appropriate. Foods that are high in calories will also keep them, a little bit full longer and also support their overall nutrition. if you want to give them things that'll last a little bit longer, like peanut butter or maybe some scrambled eggs or like avocado or these types of foods that are really nutritionally rich, but have higher calories and make your baby fuller longer, are a great option to start introducing into their diet. And you can aim for, 2 or 3 little meals a day, whatever the family is already eating, and then paying attention to texture. If your baby is able to handle stuff that has a little bit more texture to it, and maybe they're starting to have teeth and they can actually chew food a little bit more, you may be able to give them a slightly higher amount of solid foods, and that would be fine. But still, I recommend infants, even in that older age group, to still offer them some formula or breast milk as part of their balanced diet.
Okay, so thank you so much. I know that video is a little choppy. We had some tech issues earlier this week, but I guess I wanted to bring you in, Paula, to have you comment a little bit on the nutritional aspects that they were speaking towards in terms of, infants and newborns. Seems like up to 3 months, we still really need to focus on that formula, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think if mothers can breastfeed during that 1 to 3 month window, I would highly recommend that. And because of, like the area that I study is the gut microbiome. And what we see is that infants who are on formula during the early stages have a very different composition of their gut microbiome compared to infants who are breastfed, and a more negative one actually for formula. So,
Wow, really?
yeah, yeah. It's actually a real big thing. Even when you look at it, and then that can have implications for health as far as in childhood and even beyond. So in the microbiome space, we actually don't really recommend formula, and we really promote breast milk, because the breast milk, which we talked about when we did that shared uh, um, what's it called, media, is that we talked about the
Yeah.
composition. And so breast milk has over 200 milk oligosaccharides. So these are milk sugars. And then the composition of the breast milk can change with the baby. Plus, it has its own microbiome, and it has the immune cells. And so it has a lot more. It's more than just the protein and the fat and the micronutrients. It actually has like its own microbiome. And so it's really important. So I would, if mothers can in this time breast milk and breastfeed and pump, I would highly recommend that over trying to drive 300 miles to find formula, if that's your option, if you can do that. As far as the nutrition part, you know, and then I really love what Dr. Yancey was saying about it is important about the balance. And this is why breast milk is also so crucial, because it changes, the balance naturally changes as the baby nurses. And so your body is tailored to figure out, okay, the baby needs more. Your body can actually sense if the baby is sick just from the information, the signaling from the saliva,
Love it.
and then the breast milk will then reconform and change to know that, okay, need more of this, need more of that, or pull back on this, pull back on that. And then so the balance is always appropriate, the protein and the fat and the micronutrients. One of the areas I think that I'm concerned about for infants during this time is not having micronutrients. And just like Dr. Yancey was saying about the developing kidneys and liver, I'm worried about the developing the brain, the gut microbiome. Micronutrients are crucial during the first 1,000 days. So this is the first from conception to the first 2 years of life. During that stage, the micronutrients play a huge role in programming so many aspects of our bodies, not just our liver and kidney, but also your skeletal muscles, the bone, your bone mineral content, like all of those things, the lean tissue mass that you will carry throughout your life. And during that time, if your body doesn't have the right nutrition, it makes certain calculations and adapts and adjusts, because it assumes the environment that I'm in right now is going to be the environment that I face in the long term. And so then it makes some metabolic calculations and then begins to change things. And then it might defer things like linear growth. This is why you see growth failure when you have protein malnutrition or micronutrient deficiencies, because your body's prioritizing the nutrients to make red blood cells and to other things. So it's like linear growth. Being tall is a luxury. I don't need that. I don't need to be tall, but I need to be alive. I need to have blood. And so it will prioritize nutrients to those critical things and then defer growth and stunting because it assume that it'll catch up. The other part that we see is that when you have this nutritional deprivation early in life, you're fine as long as you're in this what we call nutritional plane. But then if you encounter like a high fat diet later in life, then that's when things get really hairy and your body, that's when non-communicable diseases develop because your body has now been trained to kind of hoard nutrients because it's in survival mode. Everything that comes in, I need to pack away. I need to use things differently. And so when you have this high fat diet now later in life, there's this dietary mismatch. And then that's when we see the disease develop. So right now it's really, really crucial. And this is why it's so heart wrenching that the politicians are being not so accommodating to mothers, because the implications of this is not just for right now in this short period, but it's just implications later in life. And it's even touch back to what Dr. Yancey was saying about, things that we did 40, 50 years ago that we thought was okay. This is what he's referring to, is that these decisions that we made earlier in back in those days that we thought it was good, we then see it manifest as disease, as non-communicable diseases, our hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. We start seeing that manifestation of that, and then we can link it back to their early life nutritional experiences.
Yeah, and I mean, all respect to our elders, because to the ancestors, we definitely did what we had to do.
Definitely.
To make it work.
Yeah, you survived. That was
yeah.
the thing. So you will survive, and that's your body. Like I said, it's always your body focuses on two things: survival and reproduction. So its main goal is like to reproduce and to stay, alive to do that. So it might say, okay, I can keep you alive for 40 years, and then after that, that's enough time for you to make another couple of you, and then So, but our ancestors did do their best, and there are still a lot of countries, and I don't want to ignore that don't have access to formulas, and they still have to have babies. Now, some of those countries, we do have a high death rate, infant mortality rate, but there are other countries, there are Asian countries that they don't do a lot of formulas. They do different things. So I think one of the things now that we need to be open to, this is an opportunity to begin to talk cross-culturally. What do other countries do? What do other ethnic groups do to feed and nurse and care for their infants during this time? And then we can look back and see, okay, so they've been doing this for generations. Where are they now? What is their health status? And then make some informed decisions. And I think that's an opportunity, something that we should take advantage of right now, that we're just not.
And then just really quickly for the older infants, let's say like 6 to 12 months, who might already be on a developmental path towards eating solids, cereals, etc. What can we do there?
Yeah, and so that I definitely agree with Dr. McCoy when she's saying about looking at the healthy fats. So your avocado, your eggs, your peanut butter. There's a lot of allergies now, so even just be careful how you introduce that. You can do a little test. So you can start introducing those types of fats that are going to last longer. Adding coconut milk to different things, or coconut oil. Those have very rich, healthy fats. That's actually one thing that I haven't heard come up. It's coconut milk. Yeah. And so those are some options once the baby gets older that you can start introducing. That's going to make them feel fuller because it has high quality fat. And the benefits of that is, even when this is over, don't take them off. Like keep it as part of their regimen, because that's actually going to make them healthier, and it will have better long lasting health benefits than going back to the trash that we typically feed our kids, because of resources. So I think that's one of the things too when I say looking at across cultures, because when I grew up in Jamaica. And so you have all these things around and available. And so you can get avocados, you can get coconut, you can get all these things, and you can easily mash them up and make it part of our food for the babies. And I think that will be something right now that they need to really pump into our communities. Like, if we can't have access to this, can we begin to pump in some of these other natural things that we can now adopt into our regular regimen and not just like a crisis mode fixing things. And that was the thing Dr. Yancey said: don't make temporary decisions that's going to have long term effects. And that's kind of, unfortunately, some of the decisions are being made already. That's out of our hands. But
Yeah.
whatever lies within our capacity, let's make a high quality one, because they do have long lasting effects.
And to that point, I know, some people might be getting somewhat desperate, but we are going to drop in the chat some resources that people can utilize. I think we mentioned earlier that WIC has a lot of supply in terms of formula, and they have been, despite Republican obstruction, they have been looking towards ways to regulate and make modifications to accommodate people. So we're going to drop those links there. There's also the breast milk banks that lactation consultant Lydia was mentioning, and we'll drop the link for that. And then there's WHO that has some breastfeeding resources. Of course, there's 211 with the United Way that you can call to try to get local community resources. And then just kind of thinking outside the box, there's also Baby to Baby, and even Amazon, who they take, EBT and WIC and SNAP for formula shipments, and it's free delivery right now during this crisis as well. And I think one of the things that Lydia shared that may have gotten lost in the feed is that, there's a lot of online groups, like tap into social media. There's a lot of Facebook family groups where communities are working together to help each other, whether it's breast milk supplies or formula supplies. So definitely try to tap in there. Do you have any other suggestions?
No, those are really, really great resources. I think the only thing I would add is, to piggyback on Dr. Yancey's comment about hoarding, and I mentioned that earlier. Try not to hoard. I know you think, okay, if I don't get everything off the shelf, my baby might suffer. But just remember, there are other babies out there as well, and they're in the same situation as you are. And then the other thing is to be kind. My goodness. I've seen a lot of, especially, and this is really to the scientific community, when you're putting out information about, especially with this raw milk thing and going on, be kind to mothers. Like, they're struggling right now to figure out how to handle the situation. It's stressful. You have a baby that's fussy, that you're going to probably switch a formula that they haven't had before. And that sometimes the adjustment period is tough, or you're transitioning back to breastfeeding. And like, consultant Lydia said, sometimes that can also be a little bit of a transition period, and the baby might be fussy, they might not be used to it. So there's a lot of things that mothers are going through, and the last thing that they need right now is to feel guilty. The last thing they need is like judgment coming from the scientific community, who just have no sympathy for what they're going through. So be kind. Compassion is free. It's free, and it doesn't cost you anything to just say, I understand mothers are going through. And there's a way you can communicate information, to communicate the dangers without being judgmental and making people feel like trash. And that's one of the things that I think is important to add.
Ooh. Have we learned that in this life? I'm not really sure if we've learned that at all. I don't know if America is the place for kindness, but
right. So
yeah.
That's why you follow people like Hood Medicine, and then you could get the information without feeling
facts.
Exactly.
Well, Paula, thank you for joining me today. I've really enjoyed having you on and having this chat. I hope that people, learn something from this, and maybe some of the resources we've shared will be helpful. At Hood Medicine, we bring you real talk and mad science so you can make the right decisions to keep your loved ones safe. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. To support our effort, donate to our cause, and find out about our next events, you can visit our website at hoodmedicine.org, or find us on social media at hood_medicine, Linktree and TikTok, and Hood Medicine Initiative on Facebook. And then you can also support us through our Bonfire merch shop at bonfire.com/store/gorilla gear. Thank you again. Stay safe, get vaccinated, and And join us again next time for HeadMed Chats. Thank you.